What's a video game you enjoyed that most people disliked? Anyone remember True Crime, Streets of LA? It seemed like a very love or hate game and I absolutely loved it. I liked how the story would branch out depending on what you did in certain missions. The martial arts were fun too. I remember the gun combat feeling kind of flat though. The first Watch Dogs, maybe it wasn't everything they promised, but it was still a pretty good game. Spore. Granted, I wasn't aware of the game till after it released, so I didn't know about all the hype and high expectations other people had. It has its issues, but it's still quite fun and sunk many hours into it. Mercenaries 2 for PS3. I love that game. Played through at 3x. Terrible online reviews. If you didn't update, the game would freeze forever. Dynasty Warriors. People give me shit all the time for liking DW like you just mash one button. I guess if you went it thinking it was gonna be Tekken, I could see how you might be disappointed. But if you go in expecting Double Dragon, it's great. It's cheesy and campy and the 1 vs 100 gameplay is super fun. The Godfather. You couldn't tell me I wasn't a mob boss. Bioshock 2. I know people don't consider the story to be as impactful as the first one, but the gameplay is way more polished. Also, I get to use a fucking drill as a weapon. That is sweet. Not sure if it's really hated, but Starfall Adventures could be considered the black sheep of its series. Is it a good Starfall game? No, since you're almost never in the Arwing. But damn, is it a good furry Zelda clone. Still one of my favorite games all these years later. There's just something super charming about it. Shadow the Hedgehog. Don't get me wrong, that game has issues, but overall I still had fun with it and would love to see a sequel that learns from the mistakes of the first game. COD Ghosts. Fun game. Like, shitty, but fun. Fallout 4. Yeah, dialogue trees weren't as varied as the predecessors, but the game was fantastic. My Melee playthrough is one of the stupidest and most enjoyable RPG experiences I have ever had. Opening up the skill tree to where you could, with enough time, fully complete it gave so much more freedom to experiment on the fly. The base building was a novel idea that would have been 1000x better if you could let your settlements naturally develop instead of micromanaging an entire map. It gets so much hate and I simply don't get why. Star Wars Battlefront Fight was so panned for its greedy microtransactions I never even considered buying it. I downloaded it on Xbox Gamers Pass a few months ago and it's so much fun. It reminded me of the old ones, which I honestly think is all anybody ever wanted. They obviously put some work in to fix their old mistakes. Too bad if they had just come out with the product they have now, it would have probably been an instant classic. Assassin's Creed 3, Revolutionary War and scenery was so awesome. The Legend of Zelda, Phantom Hourglass. Rugrats, Search for Reptar was a genuinely fun, well-made game and I'd play it again today if I could. Death Stranding. It was really amazing to see a AAA game with such a novel premise that was also enjoyable. Cyberpunk 2077 is actually a lot of fun. Hitman Absolution. I thought 47 was still badass as usual and entitled to feel some emotions. After all the years working with the IAMA, it would make sense to develop emotions over time. Yeah, the environment was a little different than the others, but I still thought it to be creative and well written. Legend of Zelda, Skyward Sword. I'm not a big fan of Zelda games, but I got it because I wanted to give the franchise another chance and it was newest game at the time. It did eventually get me into Ocarina of Time. No Man's Sky. I personally enjoyed how weird the game can be, though I do understand why so many people were pissed off when it was first released. Zelda 2, The Adventures of Link. Back when it came out, it wasn't unusual for game sequels to wildly shift genres. I love the combat of the second game so much more than the first, and the music was amazing. I wish they made more games in its style instead. Both Division games. I just like Solitaire. Nobody would play with me. To this day I am still a solitary soul. Mass Effect, Andromeda. I liked the huge worlds, the storyline, the terraforming element, and I played it about a year and so I didn't have any graphical issues. Far Cry Primal. I love that game for some reason. Dragon Age 2, it being usually considered the black sheep of the franchise. It had its faults, namely the rather heavily reused environments, but I really liked it. Both character/story-wise and general gameplay. Call of Duty World War II. The Far Cry series. Everyone is like Far Cry 3 is the best one and that's it, but the series has become vastly underrated. Haven't seen it here so I'll say Borderlands, the pre-sequel. A lot of people were expecting it to be Borderlands 3, which is also a good game. It's short, and doesn't have a lot of endgame content, but I find the space mechanics and laser guns cool. Sonic Unleashed. For the most part, The Sonic Adventure duology. People say they haven't aged well. They may not be Super Mario 64 level amazing, but I think they still hold up. Sonic Heroes. It's not that bad. It's enjoyable. Lord of the Rings, Conquest. It was so fun to play split screen, and the campaign was all that it needed to be. What I wouldn't give for a next-gen remaster. Paperboy 64. It's too obscure for most gamers to be widely disliked, but critically it's panned across the board as a bad game. Regardless, I love its absurdity and being able to pelt everything in sight with a newspaper like a maniac. Most people disliked, or most people on Reddit disliked? I'm playing AC Odyssey and I'm really enjoying it. Reddit seems to hate that game with a passion, but it generally gets good reviews everywhere else. Final Fantasy X-2, load of fluff but really good finish to that story. The Saboteur for Xbox 360 was so good I was hoping they would make a sequel or a movie based on it, but alas, never happened. Pokemon Sword and Shield. I enjoyed it. Dishonored 2 and Deus Ex Mankind Divided weren't received badly, but they were widely overlooked and considered as disappointing sequels. We don't know if either franchise will get any more titles again because of their underwhelming sales. Dishonored 2 is my favorite games ever, and Deus Ex Mankind Divided is one of my all-time favorites. Army of Two, first and second game were absolutely amazing couch co-ops. Played religiously with my twin brother. Devil's Cartel ruined the franchise and that really sucked for me. Kingdoms of Amalur. Love the art style and combat. The ease of switching classes is great too. Was pleasantly surprised when I heard a Lana Pierce reference at some FAH episodes. Fun game. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Thought the story was great and not repetitive. Loved all of the side quests. Loved the combat style. Not so much disliked, more like just ignored, but Sunset Overdrive. The game is fucking phenomenal and I've never seen/heard a single person talking about it. I got it for free years ago and literally felt bad that I didn't spend money on it. I enjoyed it so damn much. More on topic would probably be Bioshock 2. I just felt so involved in the story, still the only game to this day that has made me shed actual tears, from the best ending. And the gameplay was a solid upgrade from the original, emo. Fallout 4, spent 1,000 hours just with base building. Everyone else seems to hate it though. Really fun and replayable if you know where the secrets are. A lot of people shit on the Final Fantasy 13 games, but I genuinely enjoyed 13 too, and Lightning Returns wasn't even bad. People just got pissy about the plot. Valkyria Chronicles. It's not hated, it's just not well known. Anime World War II with a weird, but super fun, battle system. Highly recommend. Final Fantasy 15. It's not perfect and pretty unfinished, but for what it was I enjoyed it. I get a lot of the complaints people have about it, but there are some things there to enjoy I think. Mine isn't really a game, more of a series, but the new Super Mario Bros. Games. I know a lot of people aren't fans of how unoriginal they are, but I always pick them up. Quest 64, Final Fantasy, Mystic Quest, Silent Hill, Homecoming. Epic Mickey. People really dislike it for the camera. I'm not gonna lie, it's god-awful at times. However, I still consider this one of my favorite games of all time. It's easily my favorite Wii game. I honestly really liked FFX2. It didn't recapture the same kind of magical depression FFX did, but then again, it didn't really try. The gameplay was the most fun I've had with a Final Fantasy title, and as a silly little popcorn game, it was fun. I term it the best Sailor Moon game we never got. Red Dead Online. I don't know why it gets so much hate. Fallout 76. I actually ordered the collector's edition for $200 and was really excited, only to be really let down when the game released. I forced myself to play for 3 hours, but I hated every minute of it. The game was just broken, and without NPCs it just felt so lifeless. So I let it sit from 2018 until January this year, when I figured WTH, I'll give it a shot again. And man, I'm loving it so much. After all the updates they've put out over the last couple years, it's turned into the game I envisioned it to be, and it's climbed up there as one of my favorite Fallout games period. Biggest turnaround in gaming for me personally. Kingdom Come Deliverance. For me personally, I'd if it's really hated, but I made a post about it before and all I got is it sucks. I think it's amazing. For me it's Fallout 4. It was the first Fallout game I played and I enjoyed a lot of things about it, such as settlement building and the whole faction picking options and stuff like that. Heard a lot of people complain that it wasn't as good as the ones before it. E.T. It was the early 80s, and I didn't have a lot of games on the Atari. I played the FK out of that game. Falling in the pit was okay, once you got the trick of getting back out each time. I'm not going to say it was the best game ever, but for an elementary school kid who had a choice of about 5 games in the 1980s, it was amazing. I'm not sure, but nobody talks about Resistance: Fall of Man. I liked it a lot. Thought it was fun and good storytelling. Never seems to get mentioned anymore, so maybe wasn't as well liked as I thought it was. The laughing scene in Final Fantasy X is both delightful and heartbreaking. Speak against me if you wish, but I am as a stone in this matter. Mass Effect, Andromeda. I hadn't played any of the other Mass Effect games, so I wasn't trying to compare it to something greater. Yeah, the animations were wonky, but I didn't care too much about immersion. I thought the game was pretty fun. Honestly, I know Sonic 06 is a shit game, it's beyond shit and a broken mess, but there is something endearing about it. I honestly think had it been finished and polished it could have been my favorite iteration of Sonic. I don't know, there is something about this game that I love. Reminds me of the excitement I had for the 360 first coming out. It's not heavily disliked, but AC Valhalla gets so much shit about having microtransactions and booster packs that a lot of people overlook the amazing game. Fallout 4. I love it more than any other Fallout, and survival mode is thrilling. Fable 3. I know it's a bad game. When I played it I knew it was bad. I still think it's bad, and yet I still enjoy it up to that part. Call of Duty, World War II. My first COD was Modern Warfare 2, but then I stopped playing, and picked it back up when World War II was released. It holds a special place in my heart, plus, it has one of the best campaigns in the series. King's Quest VII came with our compact Presario, and I didn't know the other games in the series, so I had nothing to compare it to. KQ purists hate it, but that game will always have a special place in my heart. Golden Sun Dark Dawn. I am still waiting for a conclusion of that ending also. AC Unity, 6 years later and most of the major bugs are patched. It's truly the last assassin-y feeling game in the franchise. Minecraft, when it was being shunned on, I still enjoy it to this day and am going to try Minecraft VR soon. You guys are just naming games. In this thread I've seen Batman Arkham Knight, Bioshock 2, Skyward Sword, New Super Mario Bros. Wii, SSB Brawl and a bunch of other games that got great reviews. SMH. Shadow the Hedgehog, the branching paths and multiple endings were really cool, and I wish another Sonic game would keep the concept. Also, no matter what anyone says, Shadow, the character, is cool. The Force Unleashed 2. Don't get me wrong, there were several problems with it. Way too few levels, dumb plot, etc., but for me at least the gameplay was better than the first. I'd quite, but the option to mind trick stormtroopers into attacking each other was just so satisfying, as was cutting the crap out of enemies with double lightsabers. COD Infinite Warfare still a good campaign in my opinion. No Man's Sky, Anthem, and Cyberpunk. All three were great, despite issues, and now with the developers caring they've gotten better. I don't know if people hate it, but I think the XCOM series of games never got its full due. They are super fun and addicting, and I never really hear people mention them among their favorite games. I've played the recent one through like 4 times. I've got to Toe Jam Earl, and Echo, the Dolphin. Rogue Warrior COD Ghosts Legendary Tau Feng Fist of the Lotus Anthem Civ Rev EDF 2017 Shadowrun 2 Human Fantasy Star Universe Duke Nukem Forever Clive Barker's Jericho John Woo's Stranglehold NFS Carbon. Skylanders was fun. Marketing ploy or not, the memories I had were sincere. Parasite Eve was hugely underrated, hands down some of my favorite games on the PS1.